Here we are on the road show. This is Kathy Mink, and I have a very special guest for the second time.
Wow.
And I'm so honored and thrilled to have her in the studio with me, and her name is Jill Donovan.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Jill.
Thank you for having me back.
It's my honor and pleasure. And we have talked about on our first interview your story of your life and your testimony of how you came to know the Lord as your Savior. And it's just a marvelous, marvelous thing. This time, we're going to talk about your book. And in that, there is some biography, but it is much more than that.
Right.
There is much more information in your book than just about your life, even though your life story is very, very interesting. And your book is called The Kindness Effect, but let's tell the co-line. I'm going to let you say it. Irrational
Giving.
Yes. I love that you put the word irrational.
Because it is.
It is. It really is.
And that's the best place to be is when it's irrational.
Yes. So the book is The Kindness Effect. It's on Charisma House. It's published by Charisma House. And it is available wherever books are sold. Mm-hmm. It's available at your stores, all your Rustic Cuff stores. Mm-hmm. It's available
Amazon,
online, though, from Rustic Cuff, too, right, as well.
Yes.
And then Amazon,
Barnes & Noble.
Book
retailers.
All the online book retailers. So it is out there. It's available. And if you're interested in getting Jill's book, The Kindness Effect, Irrational Giving, you can get it at any of those places.
Yes.
So let's talk about what made you write this book.
It's a great question. I did not want to write a book. I had no desire to write a book because I just was living it and I didn't want it. I didn't want to stop and put things down on paper. And I just felt like, I don't know, I was never one of those people that wanted to write a book. And one of the editors was in Tulsa. And she came to our office and she introduced herself and she said, I really, really would love for you to write a book about your story. And I said, it's not a whole book. It's a couple chapters. It's not a whole book. And she said, would you just pray about it? And so 6 months went by and I prayed about it and still didn't feel any more moved. And so she flew back into Tulsa. She had a meeting in Tulsa and she came by my office and she said, have you reconsidered it? And I said, yes. And no, it's still no, I don't want to.
But there was a little
bit more. Just every time it was just a little bit more. But I just was sort of running from it, I think, at that point. And then a few months later, she came back and she had a piece of paper in her hand with a mock-up of what the cover would look like. With a title.
Was it the cover you chose?
It wasn't. It was not the exact cover, but it was close. And it had my name and it had the title. And I said, okay. It was so exciting to see that. And by that point, I had been moved enough over the last 9 months that this was what I was supposed to do. And I said, under one condition, that the book would not be a biography or an autobiography. I didn't want it to be just about my story because, like I said, that was a few chapters. I said I wanted it to be where each chapter encapsulated one of my favorite quotes and then stories birthed from that quote.
Yes.
And I wanted that to be the bulk of the book. And they said, okay. And so the journey began of sitting down to start writing.
Well, I don't know when you find the time to do it. I don't know how you did with your schedule. But I'm glad you said about the chapters and the quotes because I've never done this before about a book, but I really want the listeners to hear your chapter titles. You have... when you look at the table of contents, you have part 1, part 2, part 3. Mm-hmm. Part 1 is pursue your passion, therein lies your calling. Mm-hmm. And we can get back to that. Part 2, for the love of quotes, like you said you love quotes. I have to read them, Jill.
I'd love for you to.
The best time for a new beginning is right now. Mm-hmm. One day at a time. The next one is expect nothing, appreciate everything.
That's my favorite.
The next is be fearless in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire. The next is kindness is its own language. Study it until you are fluent. Perfectly imperfect. Random is never truly random. That gets into the leading of the Spirit and God coming in there.
And your knower.
Your knower, as you call it. I like that. Be all there. Faith in God includes faith in his timing. Then one of my favorites, just breathe.
Just breathe.
Let's do it right now. Grace changes everything. Dream big dreams, then dream bigger. This too shall pass. Find joy in the journey. Don't compare your chapter 1 with someone else's chapter 20.
That's my all-time favorite, that one.
That's close to mine too.
Yeah.
Cultivate the habit of being grateful and live with intention.
I've never had anybody read them all out like that. Kathy, I'm going to have you travel with me. That makes me want to go back and read it.
And then part 3, speaking off the cuff. And I like the going back to the cuff there.
Yeah.
But so many of us, Jill, have heard your story about the Oprah show. And I knew that, and you told us about it when you were here for your testimony interview. But something about the way you expressed it in the book came through so loud and clear. How hard-hitting that was in your life. What a huge disappointment. And I'm calling it this because it was a betrayal. Not just a betrayal, but it was the crushing of one of your most exciting experiences that you were looking forward to.
Yeah. When I wrote this, part of the time of writing this, I went to Arizona to be by myself. So as I was writing this, and it was out, I was in the mountains, and I could begin to feel back, even though this was years ago, I began to feel what that felt like as I was writing it. And so that's why the words were expressed the way they were, because I was alone, I was in the mountains, and there wasn't a lot of noise to distract me as I was writing. And the way that it came out was as if I were back on that stage many years ago, experiencing that.
And it did come out that way. It carried that feeling because I felt it when I read it.
Yeah.
I felt like it had happened to me, and I was sick at my stomach from the shock of it and the hurt and the disappointment.
Yeah.
And so many people have experienced things like that.
Yes.
I think I just can't get away from the word betrayal about it because that's what it was.
It's hard to know exactly what all was going on behind the scenes, but at the moment you feel it came out of the blue, it came out of nowhere, and you weren't expecting it. So at the moment you feel, how could this be happening to me? Like many people experience much worse than that, than what I experienced. But it's the same feeling of instant shock of just a letdown of what you thought it was going to be.
Right. And really beyond disappointment. And we might come back to that, but I had to laugh at you starting with your Olympic hopes in 1979.
Yes.
I hadn't realized that you had been in gymnastics. And tell us what happened.
So Nadia Comaneci was my favorite gymnast at the time, and Mary Lou Retton was up and coming few years later. And my dream was to be like them and to go to the Olympics. And so I was on a team and in Pensacola, Florida, and I would go 4 or 5 times a week to be part of this team. It was very intense, but that was my one goal I was focused on until my coach pulled me aside one day and said that he needed to level with me.
And how old were you then?
I was 9, which, I mean, my kids are that, I have a 10-year-old. And so when you're so focused on that and you're so hopeful, and then somebody comes in and tells you that, he pulled me aside that day and said, I just need you to know you're not ever going to make it big. You might need to set your hopes on something else.
Wow.
Yes. And I just remember feeling sucker punched then as well, because I don't know that I really knew that. I really believed that I could go on all the way. And so I went home and just I don't know why I didn't push through and said, I'm going to still do it. And there are some things in life that if somebody tells you that, you say, I won't listen to that. I will believe in this dream. But for some reason, and the Holy Spirit, I just said, okay, this is not my thing. And I think deep down I knew. And I said, if I can't do this, then I want to start something new, but I'm going to change it every single year. For 1 year, I will do something big, something brand new for every year until I land on something, a passion.
What a determined little girl you were at 9 years old to say, that's what I'm going to do.
I was so excited, though, because all of a sudden, instead of just this one thing I focused on, the entire world opened up to me, and I could choose from any hobby, any skill I wanted to learn. So I knew I was 10 when I started that, and that by the time I was 50, which is like 12, 15 years from now, by the time I was 50, I would have learned 40 new skills that I may never have even wanted to do had I stuck with just that one thing.
Well, some of the things you did, I got the biggest kick out of. You had a new hobby or a new thing, and you went all the way with it.
All the way, in my mind.
You worked and worked for a year. Some of them were tap dancing.
Yes.
Learning Russian.
Yes.
That's a real big one. Learning the harmonica, playing the violin, ice skating, and it looks to me like you were doing soccer the whole time in school and everything too, because you ended up didn't you get a
scholarship to ORU?
Soccer scholarship to ORU eventually.
It's amazing, though, the things that I chose, they still have an impact on my life today. I carry a harmonica with me everywhere I go, and if I'm at a restaurant,
do you have one with you right now?
I think I have one in my purse. I actually do. I saw Stevie Wonder in concert not too long ago. I had one in my back pocket.
Just
played
in case.
it for him last weekend.
You did play
I played
it
for him, which is silly. Why would you? That's just, it's silly because he's the best harmonica player. But I just wanted to be able to say I played the harmonica for Stevie Wonder. But even if I see people singing Happy Birthday to somebody at a restaurant, I will pull my harmonica out and walk over to their table and play Happy Birthday. And so all the things that I have done throughout all the years still have some sort of an impact on my life now. It really is amazing. I can point to every single for Russian. I will meet people who don't speak English very well here in Tulsa, and Russian is their main language. And so we start communicating, and it is amazing how they start lighting up that somebody they met, a random stranger, will speak in their language. And
wow.
Yeah. So God has used all of those things that I thought I was randomly choosing, but I was being led to choose that particular thing that year.
It was part of his plan for your life.
Yes.
Well, we're going to be back in just a moment on the Road Show with Jill Donovan. I'm your host today, Kathy Mink, and we're talking about Jill Donovan's new book, The Kindness Effect, that is available at all of her Rustic Cuff stores, online Rustic Cuff, and all online retailers like Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. So we'll be back in just a moment with Jill Donovan.
I'm David Warren here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world.
We're back on the Road Show with Jill Donovan talking about her new book, The Kindness Effect. And it is such a range of subjects and experiences, Jill, that really have the potential to give help to people that are in similar situations.
Right.
And I got so tickled at the tap dancing and the harmonica, the ice skating, but I was so admiring you that you worked a whole year on each one of these. You are one focused, go get 'em.
I had this excitement inside of me because it was something brand new. And at the end of the year, I would just want to perform some sort of recital to just close out that year. And that's what kept me going. Yeah.
And you did.
I did. I loved it. I still do it to this day. I still pick new things.
Well, just take a minute to tell about the tap dancing recital, because that was an eye-opener.
So I think I was 25, and I wanted to take tap dancing. And so I remember going to pick out these beautiful black shoes with the tap on the heel and the toe. And I started taking private lessons. And I believe my teacher might have been 98. I exaggerate by 20 years. But her name was Faye Prater, and she was so great, and she knew that I wanted to have a recital at the end of the year. This was just my personal goal, and I was going to invite 20 friends. She said, absolutely, we do have a recital for the entire company. And she said, I'm teaching you something that you can perform with other people, that I'm teaching them at different times. And so when it came down to the time for the recital, she put me together with the people that were learning that same song, and it was 3 children. They were 5 and 6 years old, and we all had the same outfit on, but age appropriate. And I thought, I can't do this. Cannot go out on the stage.
But she hadn't told you ahead of time.
She didn't tell me. I think she knew that I would run, but I so wanted. So I had 20 plus friends there, and then all these kids' moms. It was an entire little performing arts center at a school, and it was me and 3 children. And it was a beautiful thing. And it was funny. It was very, very funny. But we performed the same song. And these were good little kids.
Yeah.
And I look back at that and I think that was God's way of saying, you may have no pride whatsoever. You lay it down. Because this is what I wanted to do. And it was such fun.
Yeah.
And I just remember laughing at God's sense of humor. That I was so determined to be a tap dancer. But little did I know that she was going to put me in a recital with 3 children, all performing the same song.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, about the harmonica.
Yes, about that.
You recently played with Stevie Wonder.
Last weekend, he was here in Tulsa, and I went to a concert. Did not have a meet and greet, but by some crazy, I would say random, but it wasn't so random, chain of events, I wound up at midnight. It was closer to 12:30 in the morning after the concert was over, and I was down where Stevie was talking to people, and one of the members of his band came up to me and said, "Would you like to come meet Stevie?" It was crazy.
Praise
and
God.
in my back pocket I had a harmonica, and walked
your back
down
pocket.
there with my husband, and we got a picture with Stevie, and I said, I would like to play a song for you. And he said, okay. And I played just
What did you play?
Isn't She Lovely? The harmonica
That's my
part.
favorite Stevie Wonder song. I have it on my playlist.
Me too. And you know his harmonica solo in there. So I
Yes.
played his harmonica solo. And then at the I'll show you the video, but at the very end he said, he did ba-ba-da-bump-bump. And I thought, Jill, why in the world did you do that? Why did you feel led to play for Stevie Wonder? That's like, why would you play for the best? And I walked away, and a lady came up to me, sweet, sweet lady, and she said, I need to tell you something. I have a son at home, and he is autistic, and he has 28 harmonicas, and the fact that you just pulled one out of your back pocket to play for Stevie Wonder will bless him so much. I cannot wait to tell him that. And I walked away and I said, that's exactly why I did it. It wasn't for me and it wasn't for Stevie. It was for this lady and she was so moved to almost to tears. She couldn't wait to go home and tell her son that some lady pulled a harmonica out of her back pocket because he has 28 harmonicas at home, and that's his joy.
That's so God.
Yeah, so God. Because
What a
I was feeling like
blessing
that's
for that
just
boy.
silly. And God said it wasn't for about you or even about or for Stevie. It was a gift for this lady and her son. So,
Well, tell about the playing, though, when you first were
So
learning
when I
it.
was first learning it, I wanted to have a recital at the end of the year. And again, invite my friends and family, which really they don't have a choice. They have to be there.
Right.
And so I was flying home at the end of the year and realized I had not sort of set up this recital, and I got on a Southwest flight. You know, the Southwest planes used to have one row that would face the other way.
Yeah.
Yes. If you're listening and you're younger than 30, you might not know that, but there used to be one row that was facing the other way, and I was one of the last on the plane. And so I sat on that row because there were no other seats, and I carried my harmonica. This was that year, and I had practiced Christmas songs the entire year, knowing the recital, quote unquote recital, would be at the end of the year. And the pilot, we pushed back from the
Gateway,
Gateway, thank you. And the pilot said, "I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there's some inclement weather and we will be sitting for an hour." And so I suddenly realized that was God's gift to me, because an entire plane could now listen to a recital. And I pulled my harmonica out after just a few minutes of people grumbling and being upset. And I started facing the entire plane, now with the engines not on, so it was quieter. Now the people could hear me in the back. And I played 20 minutes of every Christmas song that I had learned throughout the entire year. And the grumbling turned into laughter, turned into joy, and people started singing along.
Oh,
and
wow.
I marveled at God's sense of humor, that here at the timing, the last week of December, the last couple of weeks, that I would be on a plane facing an entire plane of people who not only had nowhere to go, but they could go nowhere except listen. Yeah. So that was fun.
Well, I marvel at your boldness and your confidence, because you always move forward, and that is faith. And faith is confidence.
Yes.
And think of the people you've blessed, because you didn't hang back and doubt yourself and be shy.
I know I'm not great at any of these things. It's not like I have built this up for years and years knowing I am very excellent at what I do, but in my mind I am. And that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. So you went to ORU, you worked for American Airlines,
Yes.
and then when you got out of ORU, you decided to have another career.
I did. Yes. I thought, the world does not have enough attorneys. Then I will go to law school. But really, I just loved school so much. And I know that sounds crazy. I just loved the learning part of it, that my desire was never to be an attorney per se. I wanted to be one in name only, but I loved, so my father was an attorney. So we were going to practice together. So
Awesome.
I started law school, and after the first year
At TU.
Loved it. I was one of the older ones. I was 28 when I started, and then after my first year, and my dad and I would talk all the time about how we were going to practice together, and he passed away after my first year of law school.
Oh, Jill. So sorry.
That was hard, but I had started, and I wanted to finish.
He got to see you start.
Yes.
That must have blessed
so
him beyond
excited.
words.
So I took a year off just because it was so painful, and thought he would want me to finish, and went back. I was part-time, so it took me 4 years. And so I went back for 3 more years. And I'm amazed that even though I didn't want to be an attorney, I'm amazed that I passed the bar. I felt like that was a lot of grace
Quite
from
an
God.
achievement.
Yes. And so I know that my dad knows that.
Yes, he does.
And so I stayed and started practicing in Tulsa, family law.
He was cheering you on.
Yes, he was.
You are such a determined, you have such determination, but you have a joy with it that makes it so much fun. I think that's very inspiring.
Thank you.
And to many, many people. And I think that's one of the many reasons that God has blessed you and is using you like he is. And you have put so much of it in this book. I know you taught at law school, you did family law, but while you were doing that, you got interested in going to the Oprah show.
I did. That was one of my hobbies that I was going to do, and which doesn't sound like a hobby, but I knew how difficult it was. I had heard to get tickets, so I thought I will make that my goal this year, just to get tickets to be in the audience. And so, as you know, it was a chain of events that it took more than a year to get tickets. And through the next 4 or 5 years, it wasn't getting tickets to the show, it was actually being on the show. But I pursued that just like I pursued any other hobby I had, because I wanted to have closure. I didn't want to just try for it and then give up. So I just never stopped. And
You
I
had to have your recital.
I had to have my recital, and boy, God gave me a recital on that Oprah stage. Yes, He did. Yes, not the kind I thought I was going to have.
Unfortunately, He's given everybody free will. I shouldn't say unfortunately.
No,
and
right.
Other people come into your wonderful, exciting moment and change things. So tell us what happened for those that haven't known.
Well, I thought I was just going to be in the audience, and I found out they were looking for people to be on the show, and they were looking for regifters, and I'm a regifter, chronic regifter, and wound up on the show as a regifter on the stage with Oprah, and thought it was going to be just the beginning of something beautiful, and that was not what happened. They had etiquette experts on that day who said that my regifting was rude and tacky, and I needed to give it up and send it all to Goodwill, which I'm all for giving to Goodwill. Don't get me wrong. But it was definitely one of those moments that I just felt so disappointed because I went from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows in a matter of 2 minutes.
Well, it was humiliating.
Very, very humiliating. And
I'm shocked that they said that.
Well, they had just written a book about etiquette. And so they're not necessarily the etiquette experts. And they were from Canada. God bless Canada. They were not necessarily thinking about how I was feeling. Hindsight, it didn't feel like an attack. It just felt like their agenda. That was how they felt strongly about it. So it wasn't, I never took it that they didn't like me. They just were, when you have a strong opinion about something, you tell people, and they were very opinionated about it. But it left me feeling so low, disappointed, shocked. And now I look back and I want to write them a thank you note, because but for that, I would never have gone through what I went through to be where I am today. So
did Oprah look shocked?
She did look shocked, and she said on air, "I'm so shocked." She actually said those words. "I'm so shocked that you both feel so," to the etiquette experts, "that you feel so strongly about what you're saying to Jill." And so she was very genuine about it. She said, "I'm just shocked." And she said, "I regift." But it was happening so fast. And I know it was God's way of just setting me up for what my ultimate purpose was going to be. And I look back and say there was so much purpose in that pain that I wouldn't change it. I really, Kathy, I would not change any of the pain I've had, including that, because it has made me and given me the tools for what I need for today.
Well, we're going to take a break for a moment. And when we come back, Jill, I want you to tell us what evolved after that, that has now become world famous in Rustic Cuff.
Okay.
So we'll be back in just a moment on The Road Show with Jill Donovan.
The Road Show is a listener favorite which airs each weekday here on the Oasis Radio Network starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Road Show also has a great section on our website, oasisnetwork.org. There you'll find audio archives of select past interviews, plus guest lineup and contact information, and links to our Roadshow sponsors and its host. So join us for the Roadshow, whether on your radio, computer, or mobile device at oasisnetwork.org.
Here we are on the Road Show with Jill Donovan, author of The Kindness Effect, Irrational Giving, the best kind of giving.
Yes.
Jill, we just talked about the Oprah experience and how crushing it was and disappointing it was for you. What came out of that? Tell us how that translated from that time to Rustic Cuff.
Well, it wasn't until 5 years later, because it's not always instant, that you learn the purpose of the pain. But 5 years later, after I'd emptied the whole closet, my whole regifting closet, and said, I'll never do this again, that God, there was just an awakening inside of me in the middle of the night. And I forgave Canada, all of Canada, and said, I will accept you back as a country again. I said, I'm just going to let this go, because there's...
But it took a while.
It took a while. I can say the words, I forgive, I let it go, but sometimes it doesn't really click until months, years later. And it was the middle of the night, and I said, I felt something just leap up inside of me that I wanted to start creating again. In other words, I wanted to start my hobbies back up again because I laid that down as well.
Your 1 year each hobby.
Yes. And I missed that. Because I said, God, if starting a hobby is going to get me to that much disappointment as I felt on the stage, then I'm giving it up. Because I saw what happened. My excitement led to such great disappointment that I didn't want that to happen again. And you know what it's like when something starts bubbling inside of you. You cannot contain it.
Yes.
This desire to create and do something again was so strong that I could not contain it. It was 2:00 in the morning, and I decided to open the closet back up again that was empty for 5 years, and I wanted to fill it back up with something. And I went to my computer and sat down and thought, I had collected cuffs for many years, bracelets. When I worked for American Airlines, that's what I collected as I traveled. And I thought, I want to start making these myself and fill the closet back up and start regifting them myself. And throughout the course of the next several weeks, several months, I started to fill the closet back up with these cuffs that I taught myself how to make. I loved the process of it. I loved the learning because that's what I loved on the hobbies. I loved the learning of it, and that became my hobby. And I wanted it to stay a hobby. And God said, no, not going to stay a hobby. And it flowed into a business, not because I wanted it to be one, but because God purposed for that.
People started asking for them, didn't they?
They did. And so I would charge people $38, no matter how much time it took me to make the bracelet. I set a price of $38, which was just enough to pay for my supplies that I would put back in. And my husband would say, are you making any money from this? And I would say, no, but the leather store is. They're making.
Because you started with leather ones.
Leather
Totally
ones.
leather.
That's why I called it Rustic Cuff, because everything was rustic. All leather, and I would engrave inspirational words on it or the names of your children or something that was important to you. I loved doing that. It was such a passion. I could not stop. Nothing else mattered at the time I was doing this because I was driven to do this. And I look back now and see why, because God put a fire inside of me for this passion that ignited my soul. And it flowed from there, and that was 7 years ago. Yeah, it just became a business because there's a thing called taxes that you have to pay, and so I incorporated, which was the only thing I remembered from being an attorney, and
all that came in handy.
All that, yes, all 4 years of law school and studying for the bar, so I could be incorporated, and and that was well worth it. So and then it flowed from 1 employee to 5 employees to now 150 employees that still have the same mission as when I started, and that was to do something uncommon in a way. It happens to be jewelry. It could be anything, but to impact people's lives in an uncommon way. And a lot of that is giving them or gifting them or doing it when your knower senses, the Holy Spirit inside of me senses that it is the right person at the right time.
And it's totally exploded. It's been so successful. People love it. Women line up outside your stores to get new cuffs. And I've also heard of times, I've known people that were in line when the wait was long and you were there and you came out and gave every one of them a cuff.
Yeah.
And you're
I like to
known
go
for
stand
that.
in line. I like to disguise myself and go stand in line and listen to what people are saying. That's always fun. Yeah, I love doing that.
So many instances you tell in the book of marvelous giftings within your employees, to people that were in the store, find out they had just had cancer and it lifted their spirits, and just story after story after story you have in this book. Very inspiring. You did something recently, 2017, I think, that is really wild that I just want you to touch on because it's so interesting. You went to London.
Yes.
And you had tea with the Duchess of York.
Yes.
Fergie, we call her, Sarah
Yes.
Ferguson. How did that happen?
That was, I was part of an auction, and the prize for the auction was to go to London and have tea with Sarah Ferguson, which I thought was thrilling. I'd always loved the royal family. And so I took 2 of my girlfriends and we flew over there and we had 1 hour with her. And that's all we expected. And in the chapter, Expect Nothing, Appreciate Everything, within the course of the hour, she found out we were from Oklahoma, lived in Oklahoma. She had a connection with Oklahoma and told us about it. And before we knew it, she asked us what our plans were for the rest of the night. And it didn't matter what our plans were. We were canceling them. And she said, would you be my guest in the Royal Box at Prince Albert Hall for a benefit concert? And my driver will pick you up. He'll give you a tour of the city first, but he'll pick you up and you can sit in our box with us. And it was Beatrice, her daughter Beatrice, and Sarah and Ben Kingsley. And it was just the most surreal thing. And just to see the way that he took something that we just expected to fly over there and just have 1 hour with her, and he made it an entire beautiful day of gifting us. Yes, it was.
So these gifts come back to you too.
They do.
They do.
Yes.
It's called Seed Time and Harvest. I love it. Well, now your dreaming big is taking you into all these magnificent experiences. Mm-hmm. So what's your advice to people that have dreams but have just about given up on them?
I would say, first of all, to start saying it out loud, because there's power in what you speak and what you hear yourself speak. And I would say, and I don't even know if this is part of this chapter, but it should have been in there, but to never give up. And no dream in God's eyes is too big. I always said, God, just give me the dreams that you want me to have. And so he births these things inside of me. And I just think nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible with God. If it can happen for this one over here, why in the world can it not happen for me? And so I don't even, it just requires a little seed of faith. And when it starts happening, you don't want to stop. And so I would say to those people who want to give up, to, first of all, not only to start thinking that nothing is impossible, but to start saying it out loud, and just keep dreaming even bigger than they're dreaming now. Because
on page 66, Jill, you said, see your dreams with fear out of the way.
Yes, the word fearless comes to mind because how you act when fear is removed, it opens up an entire world of possibilities that you would never know if you kept the fear along with the dream. Yeah.
Well, what's coming to my mind right now in an image is when you pulled the harmonica out of your pocket to play for Stevie Wonder. I would say fear moved out of the way.
Yes.
And you triumphed and blessed an autistic boy as well.
The other thing is that fear, the dreams that you have can be squashed by listening to somebody say, that's stupid, don't go for that. And so you listen to that and you believe this one or however many people tell you that, and then you don't reach in your back pocket for the harmonica, and then you miss out on the blessing of somebody else. And so I always ask the Lord, show me which voices to listen to. If it's wisdom, then let me listen to that. But if it's just somebody who's speaking just out of their flesh, then I don't want to hear it.
No, because it could be very discouraging. Yes. It could stop a whole cascading plan for you and blessing others.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I was at a wedding recently, and I took a break in the bathroom and just for 5 minutes, and a lady walked in, sweet, maybe 60-year-old lady, to clean the bathrooms. It was at a hotel. Mm-hmm. And God spoke to me and said, give her whatever money you have in your purse. And I'm telling you this to say this is what I've learned over the 7 years of just my knower, of knowing when to pull out from that closet of cuffs that I have and give, or when to open my wallet.
Yes.
And I thought, I don't really want to just talk to anybody right now. I just want to be. Because I'd been with people all night long, and God sometimes just speaks just one time, but you just can't let it go. And so she walked out, and I let her walk out of the bathroom. 5 minutes later, I heard her cleaning, flushing all the toilets, cleaning them, and I let her walk out, and just that little tug that I have felt, that I've learned through Rustic Cuff, if you obey it and follow it, the blessings are so beyond what you could have imagined. And I just sat there. I couldn't let it go. It kept tugging at me. And I said, okay, God, if she is standing outside the bathroom, like literally right outside the bathroom when I walk out, I will do it. And I waited, and I sent about 5 more texts. I don't know. I just didn't want to go out there. I just didn't want to at that moment. I just wanted to be. And I said one more thing. Okay, God, she has to have the same name as my mom. which don't know.
Did you really?
Don't do this. I'm telling you, this is what I did. And it's silly because I've learned if you just obey the first time, the leading, which is how Rustic Cuff was birthed, I just started obeying. And I said that and I walked out and I almost tripped over her 5 minutes later when I walked out of the bathroom. And she was standing there with a big smile and she said, "Have a good day." And I said, "Thank you, you too." And I kept walking and I took about 5 steps and then I walked backwards and I looked at her and I said, "May I ask your name?" And she said, "It's Judy," which is my mom's name. And
did you almost fall over?
How do you spell it? With a Y. And I said, "Okay." And I didn't tell her. And I opened my wallet. I had one $100 bill in there, and I pulled it out, and she started to cry. And she said, "I can't even go into it right now. You'll never know the impact of the backstory of what this means. Thank you for doing that." And I didn't tell her any of the story. And I walked away, and I said, "God, you've taught me for 7 years to, without question, to obey," which is how Rustic Cuff has been blessed, because I've just said yes. And here in one moment, I stalled, and you still were patient with me. And here this lady named Judy, who was standing outside the bathroom, he showed me, if you just obey me the first time, and so the blessing of watching her just cry and knowing I will never know the impact that had, but he constantly reminds me, "You see what I will do if you will be obedient just the first time." Yeah.
You're listening to The Road Show. I'm your host today, Kathy Mink, and I have a very special guest, Jill Donovan, who is talking about many of the things that she has put in her book, The Kindness Effect, Irrational Giving. I like, Jill, that you have given so many examples like that story that can inspire people to step out and bless other people's lives. And so we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, I want you to talk a little bit about God's grace, how it's manifested in your life. So we'll be back in just a moment on The Road Show.
I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show.
We're back on The Road Show. We're talking about the book, The Kindness Effect, Irrational Giving, which always makes me laugh when we say that line.
It does.
Or we could call it being led of the Lord by your knower in your spirit giving. It's available at the Rustic Cuff stores, at Rustic Cuff Online, and all online booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all online retailers. And it has been sold out several times, so if you're interested in getting this book, you probably need to check several sources.
Yes.
Several sources. Jill, you have a chapter about don't compare your chapter 1 with someone else's chapter 20. Talk about that.
This is my favorite quote in the whole book because, there's a quote, "The comparison is the thief of joy."
Yes.
But it will stop a dream faster than anything else. And the excitement I had at the birth of Rustic Cuff could not be squashed, except if I stopped to look at somebody else who had already walked where I was walking and how far they had gone. I thought, how will I ever get to that point? And I remember looking at other designers and people who on Facebook had 1 million followers, and I had 100. And I thought, why should I even start? That the possibility of even ever getting there.
But you were looking at Apple, weren't you, when you saw all those millions? I remember that from the book.
Yes, I was looking at Apple and companies that were very well respected and were so far ahead. And I thought, God, why I'm just little teeny tiny. But when God purposes for something to happen, it does not matter. And so what I realized at that moment, and it has needed to be applied many times since then, is that they have had to walk through chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. If they're in chapter 20, it means they have walked where I am walking right now. And there's no shortcuts. And then instead of comparing where I am to where they are, I decided to look at the people in chapter 20 and say, what can I learn from them? That is great for them. What things can I learn from them that I want to do and that I don't want to do? And God showed me that lesson, that the minute I start to compare where we are as a company or where I am as a person to somebody else, that I start to devalue the gifts that he has given me. And maybe Rustic Cuff was just meant to stay in chapters 1, 2, and 3. And if I look at the 20, I will then devalue everything that he called me to be in those chapters. Because I believe that the devil can't necessarily take a gift away from you, but he can devalue that gift in your eyes.
He could stop your momentum.
He could stop the momentum, the excitement. And so when I look at, that's the worst part about social media, is that all these amazing edited versions of people, and you're looking at the worst character traits of yourself. And I decided as a company, and there's so much chaos in the beginning and craziness, and I thought, it's okay. This is the chapter we are walking in. This is where we are meant to be. I'm going to keep my eyes on that. And if I ever look at chapter 20, I will say, that's great for them. What can I learn from that? Because the second I start matching us up together, it's so unfair to what God has blessed us with in this chapter. And someday when we get to chapter 5 and 6, I don't want to look back at people in chapter 1 and say, good luck, you will never get it. Because God has a journey for every person that they are meant to be in the chapter they are in. And so that quote has become so personal to me, even daily, on a daily basis, personally and professionally.
Well, how do you juggle it all, Jill, with your 2 lovely daughters, your wonderful husband, and this huge business?
Yeah. I made them quit school and I pay them to be employees now. And so I get to see them all day long. It's really great. You know that, and I know you've gotten asked that question a lot. There is no magical way except to be all there. If I'm at the office and I know that God has called me to work on something that day, but I am at home emotionally or mentally, I cannot fulfill that which I need to today. In the same way at home, it's so tempting when I'm with my girls and we're just doing whatever we are at home to pull my phone out and be back at the office or back at the showroom. But it's a discipline to put it down, to hide it, to lock it in a drawer, the phone, and say, I am given this moment with my children. I will be fully present, because then I will be recharged when I get back to my phone and to the office. Now, I am not great at it, but it is a daily process of learning the joy that actually comes when I leave my children that day, that knowing I gave them all I had.
Well, just intending and wanting to do that
that
is over half the battle.
That's true.
And your girls love being involved?
Yes and no. They, it's in the very beginning, it was a lot. It was, because mommy was just a mommy at home. I didn't go anywhere. I mean, I went places, but not with this many employees. But it has become what they know and now love. But the adjustment of going from not having to mommy to having to do something, it has definitely been an adjustment, but it's just now part of our lives. And they do love it now. Yeah.
Is that one of your daughter's voice on your customer service line?
No, but I can't wait to tell the girl who did it.
I don't know if you should tell her.
No, I hope, Jen Muir, I hope you're not listening. No, but my youngest daughter would absolutely want to be her voice. My oldest would say, please, no, don't. She doesn't like, you have to get permission from your teenagers, to put any pictures or anything.
So Ireland, your oldest daughter, is how old now?
She is 14, and then
Peanut,
the
younger.
She is 10, and she is, they both are so unique in their own ways. And that's the other thing God has taught me, is that I didn't give you 2 children just to like, I gave you 2 big lessons to learn that, and to nurture, and I'm so grateful that he did.
Well, something, lest someone listening think, well, what a charmed life, she's got it, has never had any real problems. Also in the book, you tell that you had 3 miscarriages.
Yes.
Your husband, Terry, right around the time, right before you married, had a bout with Hodgkin's.
Yes.
And
We dated for 11 years, and I was a bridesmaid 13 times. Thought I would never, ever get married. I thought we would never get married because he had dealt with the cancer, and it just didn't feel like it was going to be part of our story. But, and then the miscarriages, when you go through things like that, all you can do is look at people who have babies.
Yes.
And you're back to the comparison game. Why God? Why me? But it is a constant learning of lessons that God puts in my life. So it is, I feel his favor, and at the same time, I also feel his, it's not a charmed life by any means.
Yeah. One of your chapters we read, this too shall pass.
Yes.
And find joy in the journey.
Yes.
How can anyone live without that?
I don't know. That is the great question. Otherwise, you live in a state of depression and there is no hope. But when you know that there are just seasons in life and that you will come through that season, and when there is plenty, there may be little. And when there's little, there will again be plenty.
That's right.
And if you can accept that in that season, it's much easier to find joy in the journey.
I think that this book could very well help someone to begin to give again that maybe has pulled back into depression. And what's the use?
Yeah.
Because we have a whole world out there.
Yeah.
Many of whom are feeling that way.
I hear stories from people all the time how they were in a state of depression and they gave. It doesn't have to be something monetarily, but they gave of their time and they gave of something they had, and how it began to lift. It gave them hope again in a way that nothing else could have given it to them, because they got outside of the focusing on who they were and what they were going through and started to give, and they were blessed beyond what they could have imagined. It lifted. I've many stories of people who've been lifted from depression by giving to other people from whatever place they can give within them. And a lot of times it's just time. It's sometimes, Kathy, if I'm in a state where I'm just feeling down for whatever reason, if I go into the showroom or somewhere and I start just giving of myself, I leave there more refreshed than anything else could have done for me at the time.
That is quite a spiritual principle, because Jesus did that. And what comes to mind is when his cousin, John the Baptist, was killed, when they cut off his head. He was grieved. And he went out into a wilderness area to be alone. But he was followed, as always, by multitudes. The sick, the maimed, the people that needed healing. Yeah. And so even though he was grieved, and it was such a time that maybe above anything when he was on earth, he wanted to be alone.
Yeah.
And he turned and instead began to minister to them. And so he sets that precedent for us. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah, it's true, though. Even though we don't want to, it changes things in a supernatural way. That and singing hymns.
Singing hymns. You like the hymns.
I love the hymns. Do those two together, give and sing hymns, and it will change any day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Jill, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
We only have about 1 minute or so left. I'm going to ask you if you would pray for the listeners, especially the ladies. Would you?
I would love to.
Okay.
Yes. Father, we come before you right now and ask for a supernatural touch for anybody that is listening to this broadcast, that you would give them back a hope that they have not seen for a long time, Lord, that you would show them that even though they are in a dark tunnel, that there is a light at the end of that tunnel, and that even while they're going through this tunnel, that they would begin to just sing hymns and thank you for what you are doing in their life, that they would not wish to be in another chapter, not wish to be further ahead of where they are, knowing that you are working and refining within them something that they absolutely need for the purpose that will unfold in their life. And I speak hope and life
Yes.
into the lives today. And even more than that, I just speak a supernatural joy that you will give to somebody as they have listened to this, that it will birth something brand new in them. They will stop focusing on comparison, and they will know that you have them exactly
Yes.
where you want them, and they will continue the journey as you lead them, as the Holy Spirit leads them. And we pray all of this in your
Yes.
precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
The book is The Kindness Effect, Irrational Giving. The author is Jill Donovan. And Jill, we thank you so much for being our guest on another great roadshow.
Thank you, Kathy, so much. I have so enjoyed it.
You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.